What's going on, Joe? Good to see you. How you doing?
Good, good. I saw this lineup and I was like, oh, I don't want to follow up Nico, but it is what it is. And so both petrified and excited to follow up.
No, it'll be great. It'll be great. Thanks for joining. Let me do a quick ad read if you don't mind, and then we'll jump into your session. So Attention is helping sponsor here. They have AI agents that handle your revenue operations. So if you want to check them out, please do. Again, I want to tell my sponsors that it wasn't a bunch of bots here, and thanks to the chat, I know it's not. I'm excited to have Joe present. I think I was talking with him last week about this. I feel like this area, so getting agents deployed, is something that I've thought about a bunch. I feel like it gets thrown around a lot on LinkedIn or wherever. It's, hey, we need to use agents and it needs to be agentic. We're all learning together, by the way. I should say that very much so. I think about the signal, and my newsletter is just exploring the future go-to-market playbook and publicly exploring that. And so I think this talk is going to be very educational. I think about Joe as someone who is, 6 months ahead. I think what he's talking about today, I've found, is everyone will talk about in 6 months, but it's not 5 years out. It's not theoretical. It's very much so practical things that are shipping in production. So again, yeah, Joe, thank you for being here. He runs the Workflow company. So if you want to chat with him, definitely connect with him on LinkedIn and visit the Workflow company and talk more. All right, Joe, I'm going to pass you the mic. Thanks for being here, man. Welcome.
Cool, thanks. Let me share my screen. I think there's only 20 minutes, and Brandon, you and I talked about this. Given sort of the audience, I think what we'll do is stay pretty high level in terms of, what are agents, right? And then talk a little bit about sort of the buzzword of the moment, which is context engineering. And then what I've learned deploying agents, agentic workflows, and workflows for clients as well as our own business. And so we'll do a short demo of what that looks like. But if you bear with me, I have created some crude diagrams to sort of visualize what I mean in terms of the difference between agents and workflows. So let's start there. Let's start with some definitions. Great. Here we go. Perfect. So workflows, there's a typo there. Workflows versus agents. So what are they, right? So workflows are a predetermined, deterministic set of steps that you run to get to an objective, to get to an outcome, right? So something like Zapier or HubSpot sequences where there is no LLM involved, I sort of define that as workflows. What are agentic workflows? Well, it still has sort of the higher level sequence of determined steps, but you might have an AI step in the middle where you're sending a message or a prompt to an LLM and getting responses back, right? And you want to turn whatever you get back from AI into a structured output, into JSON, for example, so that you can now take that structured output and do something more deterministic with it. So for example, you might say, write a sequence of 3 emails and give me the 3 emails in a JSON so that it's structured and I know exactly where to find the first email, the second email, and the third email. Now, what are agents in the true sense, right? It's really, I think of it as tools on loops. So they can run loops, calling tools, using tools that you equip them with until they reach an objective, right? So you might say, go out and find information about this prospect and let's write a sequence. Now, how is that different, right, from agentic workflows? Well, we're not giving it, sort of feeding it deterministic inputs, and we're not looking for deterministic outputs. We're just saying, hey, you have this research tool, you have context on our business and the type of people that we like to target, just go out and do it, right? And figure it out and then let me know what you think, right? So you're really just kind of trusting the agent to just run as many loops as possible, and then until it gets to an outcome that you assigned it. So that's what it looks like. And what is context engineering? So when we compare that to prompt engineering, if you remember a couple of years ago, people said prompt engineers are sort of the new hot role. Now everyone's talking about context engineer or engineering. What is that? Prathi said context engineering is the delicate art and science, because it's not deterministic, because you're dealing with LLMs, of filling the context window with just the right information, right? Not more, not less, just the right amount, because there is a degradation of performance if you cram a lot of context into an agent. And so what are just the right amount of pieces to feed an LLM for it to do its job well, right? And so, for example, for prompt engineering, you might just say something, write me a cold email, I target heads of sales at Series B companies. And then LLM gives you an email and it's not very good because you haven't given it a lot of your context, right? But if I'm able to feed it my product info, the exact persona, VP of sales, the prospect's LinkedIn data, right? And some writing guidelines on how I write cold emails. It has a lot of that rich context and can create a much better output that I can use. So what I want to show you is how we think about contexts, right? So these are the contexts that we create and save and store and update for ourselves and our clients. I think Nico caught at the end mentioned Octave as potentially a source of that sort of context, right? And so you have information around your products, personas, messaging, maybe campaign angles, guidelines, so on and so forth, right? And what you can do is actually, if you design it and architect it in the right way, you can actually just do this once, create sort of this foundational layer, and then start using it for workflow, start using it for agentic workflows, start using it agents. You just feed that into each of these modules, right? And so you can do the automated sequences, personalized emails, research and strategy, right? So that's how sort of, I think, agentic workflows and agents are going to go in GTM, because there's so much context, so much scattered context, so much siloed context, that you really need to sort of get that baseline and the foundation of context well, right? And so I'll show you a live demo, but first I'll show you sort of my context for the workflow company, right? So we saved it in a repo, in the GitHub repo, and it is all in Markdown files. So for example, we might say something, let's see, the company, right? So about the workflow company, it's an AI native revenue operations firm that builds bespoke custom go-to-market, blah, 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 right? And what I think, what you also should keep in mind is that these contexts, I didn't type out. I just pulled in my emails, I pulled in my Slack messages, I pulled in my marketing website language, I pulled in my LinkedIn posts, right? And just said, hey, we're trying to create these contexts. And then I gave an LLM some feedback, right? And it just generated all of this. And so what does this actually look in terms of workflows versus agents in real life? So if we go to Slack, right? So I have notifications and we have some inbound lead, okay? Let's see. This is a more deterministic workflow that I'll show you, right? Let's say this is my RB2B vector website identification, de-anonymization Slack channel where all the notifications come in. And let's just assume that Adam Robinson visited my website and it popped up, right? And so then what it's going to do is I'm saying deterministically, when I get someone's LinkedIn URL that visited my website, go and process that LinkedIn lead and stop there, find who they are, right? Adam Robinson, founder, CEO, and we can generate a sequence, right? And this is what's called a human in the loop, where notice how the agent didn't go ahead and just generate the sequence. I said, I get a bunch of hits from people that I don't want to talk to, that are just not a good fit for me, right? So I'm going to manually tell you to generate a sequence, right? So you can generate a sequence of this, and then we'll come back and see what they generate. So that's sort of the deterministic, more deterministic, I would say, agentic workflow, where now I've told the LLM to go and do some research on Adam and then write some emails, right? Then I can enroll that sequence into, you know, one of the sequencers that they use for cold email, right? Now, what does the more agentic version of that look like? So what I'll do is I'm going to talk to this Slack bot. It's going to be conversational. It's going to be a chat-based interaction. I'm going to say, the GTM agent, tell me about the personas we target at WCO, right? And then now it's responding to my question or query, and it has access to all of this repo, right? And so it'll say, I'll read the personas file to tell you about our target personas. Every time it's formatted this way, the agent is using a tool. So it is reading the personas markdown file, and it's also checking what other files are available, because it's thinking maybe there's not enough information in the personas file, right? And then eventually says, I've achieved my objective. Here's what we target at WFCO, right? And so VP head of marketing, VP head of sales, operations, RevOps leaders, founder CEOs, whatever, right? And then anti-personas to avoid. And this basically is just pulling this information, right? Now what I can do is, okay, well, let's look at Brendan Short. Sorry, my super whisper went down for some reason, so I have to type it out.
Brutal.
Let's look at, based on those personas, is there a close match? Also, given this context, plus more, feel free to get more context. Let's think about our outreach strategy to Brendan. Now, This is kind of interesting because Brandon doesn't really fit any of the personas, maybe the founders, CEOs. But now what it's going to do is it's going to use a tool to fetch Brandon's LinkedIn profile. And then it'll also look at some of his posts to get a fuller, richer understanding of Brandon. And then what else is it doing? Okay, it'll read messaging because that's needed for writing an outreach message. And then products to maybe look at what could we pitch Brandon, right? So it says strong fit, but not as a traditional customer, right? Brendan doesn't really fit our personas. His current role is founder of The Signal, content community business. He's not a buyer, but he's a valuable influencer, referral source, network access, credibility builder, right? Content collaborator. All these exact reasons why I said absolutely yes to Brandon when he invited me to give a talk, right? Basically, he's a content creator, he's a thought leader in the space, and the LLM is able to pick up on that, right? And then based on that context now is going to talk about, what kind of outreach strategy should we think about, right? Partnerships, not sale, value first, right? And then it also drafts some emails. So this is what sort of a more agentic, fluid conversation or workflow looks like. And then to finish off, I think I will just share some really high level lessons that I'm learning, that I've learned as we build out the system, which is you got to start deterministic because then you have full control over inputs and outputs, right? Start there. So something the LinkedIn, the website visitor workflow, right? And then always have a human in the loop and phase that out slowly, right? So always have control over human in the loop, do a pilot, always have someone manually reviewing, right? Doing evals. And then keep agents internal. So that's usually a good way. So, right, if you notice in Slack, right, it's all a conversation between me and the Slack agent, right? They're actually not sending emails just set until I tell them to send emails. So it's not customer facing. So there's less risk of messing up there publicly. And then the shared context foundation, same knowledge powers all your AI tools. So build it once, build a mechanism to update it well, and then you don't have to worry about it, right? Oh, one thing, yeah. On update, I'll mention one more thing, which is now you can say based on this, let's add an appropriate persona for Brandon to our context, right? And then you can actually create a request to add a persona, right, to our workspace. I'll propose adding a new persona for influencer referral partners, Brandon, to our personas context. And it's going to create that persona and that proposal. So we'll come back and look at that. So yeah, the second thing is build modules. And then if you build in a very modular fashion, what you can do is wrap those in tools that you can then give to agents. So that's a little bit of a, I guess, more technical concept, but always build sort of modularly so you can swap in and out different tools. And then the big thing for me was minimizing abstraction. With Cloud Code, right, the cost of AI or the cost of abstraction is too high. You can just talk to an LLM and tell it to write scripts, write code, do a bunch of stuff, right? And so the abstraction layer of UI, the abstraction layers of click and drag, those are becoming more expensive. And so I think we're going to go in a direction where you can sort of really minimize that abstraction layer and then work with Cloud Code or another agent to get a lot of work done. So yeah, I'll stop there. It proposes a new persona, but I can't see it right now. So I'll stop sharing my screen there.
Amazing. By the way, I know when we talked about this, the magical thing in my mind, this big unlock or the thing that changes, I guess, in an AI world is that feedback loop that continually learns. So when that last step is a massive, it's a small thing, it's subtle, but it's super important, is you are training the context on an ongoing basis. And so the more inputs you get and the more feedback you get, it's just going to train your system so that it's literally getting smarter over time. And as your go-to-market motion inevitably evolves, which just a product evolves, your go-to-market motion should evolve. As your competitors change, as the product changes, as the landscape changes, there's a lot of, as your team changes, there's a lot of different factors there. So yeah, amazing. I had one quick question. Do you have a couple more minutes to stay on?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So what are the workflows that are working today? When you think about when you're working with clients and kind of actually seeing workflows out in the wild, what are a couple of specific workflows that you see are working really well and kind of the use case or the context of those? Just a couple of high-level ones.
Yeah, I think there's LLM-driven CRM enrichment. I think Andreas and Matthew talked about it, right, in the first session. I think that if you now combine that with a shared context and enrich based on your unique business context, things become really interesting. So that's working out really well. And then what I showed you in terms of sort of generating outreach emails and stuff like that, not so much lead gen, that's definitely not the point, but outreach experimentation, right? So you can quickly spin up a markdown file on a campaign angle or a new product launch that you're thinking about. And it takes you less than 30 minutes to set that up. You feed it some context based on your internal docs, and then you can test that campaign angle really quickly, right? And you can even do sort of an A/B test to see how that works. So yeah, rapid agentic outbound experimentation, I think, is something that we're doing a lot for clients in terms of what are the personas, what are the angles, pain points, what products should we sort of mention, right? So we're testing all of those.
Amazing. Okay, two more quick questions if it's cool. So number one, who owns this? Who would you recommend? Is it a stage of company? Is it a certain person? Should you outsource it? Is it a little bit of both? How do you think about the framework if you're a CRO or a go-to-market leader at a company and you're okay, this seems interesting. I should probably build some of these things. Should that be done in-house? Should you work with a third-party person? Should you do both? How do you think about that decision?
Yeah, I think there are a few companies that are doing this really well internally, but everyone's sort of figuring these things out, right? And so I think I'm biased, but I think there is some merit in bringing in sort of an external expert to set this up, get it going, and then sort of cut down the time, all the sort of mistakes that I've made, right? You're kind of getting that, so just to get started really quickly. And it is, I think right now agents are still, if you want to custom roll your own, are quite technical, right? And so whether you're going to get sort of the resourcing internally to sort of do this moonshot or pilot might be sort of political conversation as well. That might be actually easier to just hire an external agency and kind of run this.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's right. By the way, yeah, I also think working with somebody like Joe obviously makes a ton of sense. You've done this a bunch of times, which is a unique advantage to a third-party consultant coming in and being able to say, okay, here are all the pitfalls and the things to avoid, and here are some ideas that I have as kind of somebody coming in externally. Awesome. One last question from Matt in the chat. So when you're building Claude into your agentic workflows, do you find yourself using Claude skills? And do you use within the Claude UX or through something the anti-gravity IDE? And are you using seeing GTM folks doing more of the quote unquote coding?
Yeah, skills are a great way to start. So skills basically are just a prompt that tells an agent to do a certain task a certain way. They're a really good prototyping exercise. That's very agentic. And then once a skill starts working really well, you probably want to turn that into more deterministic code so that it just happens every time without any issues. So yeah, that's how I would think about it. For me, anti-gravity or other IDs, I haven't really looked at. Cloud Code has taken over sort of all of my workflows. Our team uses it. We share all the context inside of GitHub repos and issues. And so we're kind of locked in terms of having all of our contexts and using that across Cloud Code.
Nice. Awesome. Cool. Joe, anything else you want to add? This has been amazing. I think, by the way, my biggest unlock in the agentic stuff is I think I came into 2025 thinking agents are going to be a really big deal and we're not going to build workflows anymore and logic-based things. And my thinking has evolved over the past 12 months where I'm okay, it's much more nuanced than that, of course. And there are actually workflows that you're going to build that have some sort of agentic reasoning layer or step in it. And then it's going to have some sort of, logic-based step for, predictability, cost savings. There are actually advantages to doing hard-coded components. So that's been one of my biggest takeaways in talking with you about this stuff. Anything else you want to add before you go?
No, I think I covered everything. Thanks for having me.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, of course. Thank you for joining. If people want to reach out, is the best place on your website, LinkedIn?
Yeah, website, wfco.co or LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me and DM me.
Awesome. Amazing.
Cool.
All right, Joe. Thank you so much, man. Good to see you. Appreciate you.
Likewise. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
See ya.